Hey y'all, today's January 27th and we are talking about solving multi-step equations, but today we're going to see variables on both sides. So our steps today are a little different from what they were yesterday. Step 1, we want to simplify each side. So if we see parentheses, use the distributive property. If we have like terms, combine them. Step 2, use inverse operations to move the variables to one side of the equation. That means I want all my variable terms on the same side of the equal sign. Step 3, solve the remaining equation. And that should be an equation you know how to solve using inverse operations. And as always, you can check your solution by plugging it back in. Those steps are going to make a lot more sense as we get started with some examples. So let's jump right in to number 1. So we have 5 minus r equals 2 minus 4r. As always, I like to draw a line through my equal sign because that helps me see that I have two sides. Now on the left-hand side, 5 minus r, no parentheses, so I don't need to distribute, and there are no like terms. On the right-hand side, 2 minus 4r. Again, no parentheses, so no need to distribute, and there are no like terms. So I don't need to do step 1. Everything's already simplified on both sides. Step 2, though, I need to move my variables all to the same side. So my variable terms are negative 1r and negative 4r. So I'm going to use inverse operations to move them, and it doesn't matter which one you move. I always move the smaller number. So between negative 1 and negative 4, which one is smaller? Well, negative 4 is a lot smaller than negative 1. So that's the one I'm going to move. So what is the opposite of subtracting 4r? Well, adding 4r. So I'm going to add 4r on both sides. So let's talk about the left-hand side. My 5 just comes down, and now I have negative r, negative 1r, plus 4r, which is 3r. So 5 plus 3r equals, on the other side, my 2 comes down, and my 4r's were canceled out. Now this is an equation you know how to solve. I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. So my 5's cancel out. I've got 3r equals 2 minus 5 is negative 3. To get r by itself, I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. My 3's cancel out, so r equals negative 1. And that is my solution for number 1. Okay, moving on to number 2. As always, I'm going to draw my line through my equal sign, and I'm going to check my sides. Negative 1 plus 6v, no parentheses, no like terms. Negative v plus 6, again, no parentheses, no like terms. So everything is simplified. So my variable terms, I have 6v and negative 1v. So I've got to move one of those over to the other side, and I always move the smaller number. Well, 6 and negative 1, which one's smaller? Negative 1 is smaller. So how do I move negative v to the other side? Well, inverse operation, I'm going to add v, and I'm doing that to both sides. So on the left-hand side, my negative 1 comes down, and now I have 6v plus 1v, which is 7v. And that equals what I have on the right-hand side. My v's canceled out, and I just bring down my 6. So now this is an equation that you know how to solve. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So on the left-hand side, my 1's canceled out. I'm left with 7v equals 6 plus 1 is 7. Now to get v by itself, I'm going to divide by 7 on both sides. So my 7's canceled out. V equals 7 divided by 7, which is 1, positive 1. Okay, moving on to number 3. Again, start with our line down our equal sign so that we can see that we have two sides. On the left-hand side, no parentheses and no like terms. On the right-hand side, no parentheses and no like terms. So let's identify our variable terms. 5n and 6n. Okay, which one do I want to move? I want to move the smaller number. So which number is smaller, 5 or 6? Well, 5. So how do I undo adding 5 in? by subtracting 5n. So I'm subtracting 5n on both sides. So on the left-hand side, my 5n's cancel out and I'm left with just negative 4 equals, on the right-hand side, 6n minus 5n is 1n. I'm just going to write that as n, and I'm going to bring down my plus 1. Now this is an equation you know how to solve. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. So on the side with the variable, my 1's cancel out, n is by itself. On the left-hand side, negative 4 minus 1 is negative 5. So negative 5 equals n, or you could write that as n equals negative 5. Moving on to number 4. Start by drawing our line through our equal sign. Check the left-hand side. No parentheses, no like terms. Right-hand side, no parentheses, no like terms. So let's identify our variable terms. We have 6x and 4x. I want to move the smaller number. Which one is smaller? Well, 4x is smaller. What kind of 4x is that? It's a positive 4x. So how do I move it to the other side? Well, I do the opposite of a positive 4x, which is a negative 4x. So I'm subtracting 4x on both sides. So on the left-hand side, my negative 7 comes on down, and now I have 6x minus 4x, which is 2x, a positive 2x. And that equals what I have on the right-hand side. My 4x's cancel out, and that leaves me with just a negative 1. Now I'm working to solve this equation and get x by itself. I'm using inverse operations, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. On the left-hand side, my 7's cancel out. 2x is what's left. I've got negative 1 plus 7, which is 6 on the right-hand side. Now to get that x by itself, I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. So on the side with the variable, my 2's cancel out, x is by itself, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So x equals 3 is my answer. Okay, moving on to number 5. Again, we're going to draw our line through our equal sign. Check this side right here, no parentheses, no like terms. Check this side, no parentheses, no like terms. So let's identify our variable terms. 2k, 1k. So I want to move the one that's smaller. Which one's smaller? Well, 1k is smaller. So what kind of 1k is that? Is it positive or negative? It's positive. So what's the opposite of a positive 1k? Negative 1k. So I'm going to subtract k on both sides. Okay, let's talk about the left-hand side. I'm going to bring down my negative 7, and now I have 2k minus 1k, which is simply positive 1k. I'm just going to write it as plus k. And I'm going to set that equal to what I have on the right-hand side. My k's cancel out, and that leaves me with just an 8. Okay, now this is an equation you know how to solve. I'm going to add 7 to both sides. So on the left-hand side, my 7's cancel out, k is by itself, and 8 plus 7 is 15. So k equals 15 is my solution. Okay, moving on to number 6. Start by drawing our line through our equal sign. Check our sides. No parentheses, no like terms. Same thing over here. No parentheses, no like terms. So let's identify our variable terms. We have negative 3y and a negative 1y. I want to move the one that's smaller. Which one is smaller? Negative 3 is smaller than negative 1. So I'm going to move this term to the other side using the inverse operation. So what's the opposite of subtracting 3y? Hopefully you just said adding 3y, because that would be correct. So I'm adding 3y to both sides. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to bring down my negative 11, and my 3y's canceled out. On the right-hand side, I'm going to bring down my 1, and negative 1y plus 3y is going to be 2y. So now this is an equation that you know how to solve. So I'm going to move this 1 right here to the other side. Well, what kind of 1 is that? It's positive, so I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. So on the left-hand side, negative 11 minus 1 is negative 12. And on the right-hand side, my 1's canceled out, and I'm left with 2y. Now to get that y by itself, I'm going to divide by 2 on both sides. On the side with the y, my 2's canceled out. Y is indeed by itself. And on the other side, I have negative 12 divided by 2, which is negative 6. How did I know it was a negative 6? Well, I had a negative term divided by a positive term. And when you have different signs in your dividing, you know your quotient has to be negative. Okay, let's move on to page 29. So number 7 right here. I'm going to start by drawing my line through my equal sign, and I'm going to check my sides. Over here on the left, no parentheses, no like terms. But over here on the right, I have parentheses. So I'm going to need to distribute. So I'm just going to copy down my left-hand side, 5n plus 11. And I'm going to set that equal to what I'm going to have on the right-hand side. But I'm going to have to distribute first. So what is negative 6 times 4? Well, negative 6 times 4 is negative 24. And now I'm going to multiply negative 6 times negative 2n. Well, negative 6 times negative 2 is a positive 12, and the n stays with that. So now that I have simplified that side, do I have any like terms? No. So I'm done simplifying. Now let's identify our variable terms. 5n and 12n. Remember, I like to move the one that's smaller. So which one of those numbers is smaller? Hopefully you said 5. So I'm going to move that 5n term. What kind of 5n is that? Is it positive or is it negative? It's positive. So how do we undo a positive 5n? Well, with a negative 5n. So I'm subtracting 5n on both sides. So on the left-hand side, my 5n's cancel out, and I'm left with 11. On the right-hand side, I'm going to bring down my negative 24, and now 12n minus 5n is 7n. Okay, now this is an equation that you know how to solve. I'm going to add 24 to both sides. So on the left-hand side, 11 plus 24 is 35. Equals, on the right-hand side, my 24 is canceled out, and 7n is all that I have left. Now, to get that n by itself, we're going to divide by 7 on both sides. So on the side with the variable, my 7's cancel out, n is by itself. And on the other side, I have 35 divided by 7, which is 5. So 5 equals n is my solution. Okay, moving on to number 8. This one's very similar. So on the left-hand side, I see I have parentheses. I have to distribute that first. So let's multiply 5 times a. Well, what is 5 times a? 5a. Now let's multiply 5 times negative 2. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Now on the right-hand side, no parentheses, no like terms. So I'm just going to copy that down as is. 2 plus 3a. So let's just double check the left-hand side. Do I have any like terms? Nope. So I have simplified as much as I can. So now we're ready to identify our variable terms, 5a and 3a. Well, which one of those is smaller? Well, 3a is smaller. So I'm going to move this 3a to the other side using the inverse of adding. Well, what's the inverse of adding? Well, subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 3a on both sides. Okay, so let's talk about the left-hand side. 5a minus 3a is 2a. Oops. And I'm going to bring down that negative 10, and I'm going to set that equal to what I have remaining on the right-hand side. I'm going to bring down my 2, but my 3a's canceled out. So now this is an equation you know how to solve. I'm going to add 10 to both sides. So on the side with the variable, the left-hand side, my 10's canceled out. I'm left with 2a equals 2 plus 10 is 12. To get a by itself, divide by 2 on both sides. So a equals 6. Okay, moving on to number 9. Very similar here. We're going to start by drawing our line through our equal sign. And I see on the left-hand side, I need to distribute first. So we're going to multiply 5 times 6p. Well, 5 times 6p is 30p. And now we're going to multiply 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25. And all of that equals what we have on the right-hand side. And when I look at this, there's no parentheses and no like terms. So I'm just going to copy it down as is for right now. Negative 25 plus 5p. Now let's double check the left-hand side. Do I have any like terms? Nope. So everything is as simple as it can be. Let's identify our variable terms. 30p and 5p. I want to move the one that's smaller. So which one's smaller? Well, if you said 5p, you're correct. So notice that's a positive 5p. What's the opposite of a positive 5p? Well, a negative 5p. So we're going to subtract 5p on both sides. So on the left-hand side, 30p minus 5p is 25p. And I'm going to bring down that plus 25. Now on the other side, I'm going to bring down my negative 25 and my 5p's canceled out. So I've got lots of 25's here. 25p plus 25 equals negative 25. Now we're solving this like a normal two-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 25 on both sides. So on the side with the variable, the left-hand side, my 25's canceled out and I'm left with 25p. On the other side, negative 25 minus 25 is negative 50. Now to get p by itself, I'm going to divide by 25 on both sides. On the side with the variable, my 25's canceled out, p is by itself, and negative 50 divided by 25 is negative 2. How did I know it was a negative 2? Well, I had a negative divided by a positive, so that makes my quotient negative. Moving on to number 10. Again, very, very similar. Let's start by drawing our line through our equal sign. On the left-hand side, I have parentheses, so I have to distribute first. So we've got negative 4 times negative 4, which is a positive 16. Now we have negative 4. Oops, I don't know what I just did. We have negative 4 times 4x, which is going to be a negative 16x. Okay, I'm going to use some magic and move that because I got it a little far away. Set that equal to what we have on the other side. And what I see over here, no parentheses and no like terms. So I'm just going to copy it as is. So negative 35 plus x. Let's double check the left-hand side. Do I have any like terms? No, I don't have any like terms. So now I'm ready to identify my variable terms. So we have negative 16x plus 1x. And I want to move the one that is smaller. Which one is smaller? Well, negative 16 is smaller than 1, a positive 1. So I'm moving this term right here. Well, what's the opposite of a negative 16x? A positive 16x. So I'm going to add 16x to both sides. So let's talk about the left-hand side. My 16 is going to come down, and my 16x's canceled out. On the right-hand side, my negative 35 comes down, and now I have 1x plus 16x, which is 17x. Okay, so now I can solve this like a normal two-step equation. I'm going to add 35 to both sides. Okay, on the left-hand side, 16 plus 35 is 51. And on the right-hand side, my 35's canceled out and I'm left with 17x. Now to get x by itself, we're going to divide by 17 on both sides. So my 17's canceled out X is indeed by itself. 51 divided by 17, if you put that into your calculator, you're going to get 3. So X equals 3 is our solution. Okay, moving on to number 11. So this one's a little different because I see parentheses on both sides. So I have to distribute on both sides. So let's start with the left-hand side. -8 times -5r is going to be a positive 40r. Now I'm going to multiply -8 times 7, and -8 times 7 is -56. Okay, let's look at the right-hand side. I've got 7 times 7r, which is 49r. And now I'm going to multiply 7 times 1, which is 7. So my new equation is 40r minus 56 equals 49r plus 7. Do I have any like terms that I can combine? Well, on this side, no like terms. On this side, also no like terms. So I have simplified this as much as I can. So let's identify our variable terms, 40r and 49r. Remember, I like to move the one that's smaller. Which one is smaller? Hopefully you said 40r. What kind of 40r is that? Well, it's a positive 40r. So how do I undo a positive 40r? With a negative 40r. So I'm subtracting 40r on both sides. So let's talk about the left-hand side. My 40r's canceled out and I'm left with -56. On the right-hand side, 49r minus 40r is simply 9r, and I'm going to bring down my plus 7. Now, this is an equation that you know how to solve. We're going to subtract 7 on both sides. On the left-hand side, -56 minus 7 is -63. On the right-hand side, I'm going to bring down my 9r, and my 7's canceled out. So now to get r by itself, we're going to divide by 9 on both sides. So on the side with the r, my 9's canceled out and r is by itself. On the other side, I have -63 divided by 9. I'm going to get -7. So r equals -7, or -7 equals r. That's our solution. Number 12. Okay, so same thing. I've got parentheses on both sides, so I'm going to have to distribute on both sides. Let's talk about the left-hand side first. So I'm going to multiply -9 times 1. Well, -9 times 1 is -9. Now I'm going to multiply -9 times -5c. A negative times negative is a positive, and it's going to be positive 45c. Now on the right-hand side, notice I don't really have a number that's in front of that parentheses, but I have a negative sign. So what's really there, what's understood to be there? A -1. So go ahead and write that -1 in, because I think it helps you visualize that. But now this is something that we can distribute. So we have -1 times -9c. Well, a negative times a negative is a positive, so it's going to be positive 9c. Now we have -1 times 9. -1 times a positive 9 is going to be -9. So our new equation is -9 plus 45c equals 9c minus 9. Let's check both of our sides for like terms. So over here on the left-hand side, do I have like terms? Nope, I do not. What about on the right-hand side? Do I have like terms there? Nope, again, I do not. So I can't combine like terms. So I'm ready to identify my variable terms and move them from one side to the other. So my variable terms are 45c and 9c. I want to move the smaller number. Which one is smaller? Hopefully you said 9c. That one is indeed smaller. So what kind of 9c is that? Is it positive or is it negative? It's a positive 9c. So what's the opposite of a positive 9c? Well, a negative 9c. So we're going to subtract 9c on both sides. So let's talk about the left-hand side. I'm going to bring down my -9, and now 45c minus 9c is going to be 36 C. Now on the right-hand side, my 9C's canceled out and I'm left with negative 9. Okay? Now, I'm going to solve this like a normal two-step equation. I'm going to add 9 to both sides. My 9's will cancel out on the left-hand side, and I'm left with 36C equals, and on the right-hand side, I have negative 9 plus 9, which is 0. So 36C equals 0. We can continue to solve this equation. I'm going to divide by 36 on both sides. On the side with the variable, my 36's cancel out. C is by itself, and 0 divided by 36 is 0. So C equals 0 is my answer. Okay, number 13. So first things first, draw our line through our equal sign. And I see I've got parentheses on both sides, so I know I'm going to have to distribute. So let's start on the left-hand side. We're going to multiply negative 3 times D. Well, negative 3 times D is negative 3D. And now I'm going to multiply negative 3 times negative 4, which is going to be positive 12. Okay? Now on the other side, I see that I have parentheses here, so this is what I'm going to distribute. Negative 2 to the 8 and negative 2 to the 4D. So I'm just going to copy this part down. I know I'm going to have to combine like terms in a minute. So negative 2D, that's our first term. Now we're ready to distribute. Negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. And now we're going to multiply negative 2 times 4D. Negative 2 times 4D is going to be negative 8D. So let's check for like terms. Over here on the left, no like terms. The left is as simple as it can be. But over here on the right, I do have some like terms. So my like terms are negative 2D and negative 8D. So I'm going to have to go down a row. So I'm just going to copy down the left-hand side one more time. Negative 3D plus 12 equals. Now on the right-hand side, we're combining our like terms. So negative 2D minus 8D is going to be negative 10D. And I'm going to bring down that minus 16. So now that I have distributed and combined like terms, everything is as simple as it can be on both sides. We're ready to identify our variable terms. So we have negative 3D and negative 10D. Well, which one is smaller? Well, negative 10 is smaller. So that's the one that I want to move to the other side. So what's the opposite of negative 10D? Well, a positive 10D. So I'm going to add 10D to both sides. So let's talk about the left-hand side. Negative 3D plus 10D is going to be 7D, and I'm going to bring down that plus 12. On the right-hand side, my 10D's canceled out, and I'm left with negative 16. Now we solve this like a normal two-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 12 on both sides. So on the side with the D, on the left-hand side, my 12's canceled out, and I'm left with 7D. On the other side, the right-hand side, negative 16 minus 12 is negative 28. Okay, now to get that D by itself, I'm going to divide by 7 on both sides. So my 7's cancel out. D is by itself, and negative 28 divided by 7 is negative 4. So D equals negative 4 is my answer. Okay, last one, and this is probably the most challenging one, but I know that y'all are up for it. So draw a line through your equal sign. Now I've got parentheses on both sides, so I know I need to distribute. So let's start with the left-hand side, distributing with this fraction. Now you could change this fraction to a decimal, but the problem with relying on that method is when you see a fraction like 1/6 or 2/3, when you have a multiple of 3 in your denominator, that's going to be a repeating fraction, and so you can't change that to a decimal. So let's think about this for a minute. If I were to multiply 3/4 times negative 8v, do you agree that I would have 3/4 times negative 8 over 1? Well, yeah, I would, right? So, and actually, let me just write that in a different color. So we have 3/4 times negative 8 over 1. Of course, my v is attached to that, but when I see it like this, I can see very clearly that I can reduce, right? So my 4 and 8 definitely reduce. What number goes into both? Well, 4 goes into both. 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 8 two times. Okay, what about the other fraction, or the other option? 3/4 times negative 4. Well, let's write that out too. 3/4 times negative 4 over 1, right? And again, I can see very clearly that I can reduce. What number goes into both of those? Well, 4, of course. 4 goes into 4 one time, 4 goes into 4 one time. So you can always look at your denominator and these numbers here to see if those reduce. And if they do, you can go ahead and reduce them. So the way I'm going to mark this up in my problem is I'm going to mark out that 4, and this 8 becomes a negative 2, and this 4 becomes a 1. Okay, so now I'll just multiply 3 times negative 2v and 3 times negative 1. Okay, so now that we've kind of established that, let's work on this problem. We're starting with distributive property, so 3 times negative 2v is going to be negative 6v. And now we're going to multiply 3 times negative 1, which is negative 3. Now on the other side, I see that I have an extra term back here, so I'm going to distribute and then I'm going to have to combine like terms. So distributing first, 2 times v is 2v, and then 2 times 6 is 12, and of course minus 3v. Okay, now on the left-hand side, it's as simple as it can be. No more parentheses, and there are no like terms. So I'm just going to copy it down again. Negative 6v minus 3. Now on the right-hand side, my like terms are 2v and negative 3v. Well, when I combine those, I get negative 1v. So negative 1v, and then I'm going to bring down that plus 12. So now everything is as simple as it can be on both sides. So let's identify our variable terms. Well, our variable terms are negative 6v and negative 1v. Which one is smaller? Hopefully you said negative 6v. So since that's the smaller term, I'm going to move that one to the other side. So what's the opposite of a negative 6v? Well, a positive 6v. So I'm adding 6v to both sides. So on the left-hand side, my 6v's canceled out and I'm left with negative 3. And on the right-hand side, I have negative 1v plus 6v, which is 5v. And then I've got that plus 12 that I'm going to bring down. Now this is a regular two-step equation, so we're going to solve it like normal. Subtract 12 on both sides. On the left-hand side, negative 3 minus 12 is negative 15. On the right-hand side, I'm going to bring down my 5v, but my 12's canceled out. Now to get v by itself, we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. So on the left-hand side, I get negative 3 equals, on the right-hand side, my 5's canceled out, v is by itself. Negative 3 equals v is our answer. That is the end of our notes for today. Your homework is on the next 2 pages, and you will do all of the problems. Actually, sorry, no. Your homework is on page 31 and 32, and you will do numbers 1 through 12.